Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, July 7th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the 2024 Senate elections and the Democratic Party's pathway to a majority in this extremely competitive year for these Senate races. Now, we have been talking very much about the presidential level, not much about what is happening on an individual basis in these key Senate races, and you can expect over the next coming months videos talking about races like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Arizona and Ohio, and a more narrow lens scope on what we talk about when we're looking at Senate elections that are competitive this cycle. And what we also will see are numerous videos talking about the collective, where Democrats are today, where Republicans are today. I haven't updated my 2024 Senate election projection since May 24th, and there's a reason for that. Not much really has changed over the past month and a half. With almost all the conversation geared around the presidential election, not much really has transpired, which honestly benefits the Democratic Party, given that the last time I made a Senate projection, they were in good standing in many of their battleground states. But they did not, in fact, have an outright majority. And that calls into question, where is the Democratic Party's pathway to 50 or 51 seats? Because I can tell you at face value, it's certainly not going to be easy. To put things into perspective, the last time these Senate elections were up was in 2018. Then Republicans had a 53-seat majority following these Senate races. Obviously today, if you know the numbers, they're 51 to 49, and so Democrats are arguably in a better position, meaning they have seemingly more room to fall. But 2018 was the first step of a multi-step sort of solution here at Republicans pushing out swing state Democrats in some of these redder states. States like Indiana and Missouri and North Dakota are easy examples of where the Republican Party did a very good job in 2018 at making the entire race more nationalized and defeating some of these otherwise more popular incumbents. Now, in 2018, the Democratic Party sort of faced an impossible challenge. How do they expand from where they were, which was a 51 to 49 advantage for the Republican Party? After 2016, it was 52 to 48. If you remember that bit of lore, in December of 2017, Democrats flipped the Alabama Senate race there, won it for the first time in over 25 years. The last Democrat who had been serving in the Senate from the state of Alabama was serving alongside the newly elected Democrat there, Doug Jones. Richard Shelby switched parties from Democrats to Republicans, so that was a big deal. And so then came in 2018, and Democrats were hopeful. They made plays for Mississippi and Texas and Tennessee, but ultimately, largely because of polarization and Donald Trump's involvement in many of these states, the states that were overwhelmingly conservative voted Republican down the ballot, and that impacted Democrats quite negatively. And now when I say they faced an impossible challenge, I don't mean that it was hard. I mean it was near impossible. And while they'd certainly in a better circumstance, just slightly performing better in some of these battleground states, could have expanded where they were in the Senate, maybe even won back Senate control, that was not the case of this cycle. And there's very clear reasons. Democrats were faced up in 10 states where Democrats were incumbents in Donald Trump states. Arizona had a Republican incumbent, Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, Florida, all Trump states, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And Democrats had competitive races in states Donald Trump won as well, like Arizona. And so all around here, Democrats were defending 10 seats in states Trump won, arguably in some states, by abnormally large margins. For instance, in West Virginia, Joe Manchin had to fend off a seat where Donald Trump had won the election here by 40 percentage points just 2 years prior. In Montana, John Tester had to fend off a Republican challenger in a state that Donald Trump won by 21. And in some cases, the margins were too large to overcome. For instance, in North Dakota, Kevin Cramer, the incumbent House rep there, defeated Heidi Heitkamp by 10 points in a state Donald Trump won by over 30. That is how lopsided these states were in favor of the Republican president at the time. And so Republicans ran up the margins in North Dakota, in Missouri, in Indiana, and Florida. Florida was the real, crapshoot there for Democrats. That was a real and complete failure here. But what cannot be ignored is that, Democrats lost in these states, and that Democrats were able to get a blue wave on the House level, on the governor level. That should not be ignored. Also, too, it set a new standard for Democrats in Nevada and Arizona and got them their first Democratic senator in Arizona in quite some time, solidified the 2 Democratic senators in the state of Nevada here, but it pretty much set them up for not too much else in 2024. Why? Because Democrats were now going to be defending again in a similar way, the way they defended Missouri and Indiana and North Dakota, now with West Virginia and Ohio and Montana. Ohio went to Trump by 8 points twice. West Virginia went to Trump by 35 points plus twice. Montana went to Trump by 15 points plus twice. And so now we're back again, except this time it's not a midterm, it's not a blue wave year, and Democrats are fighting and defending territory in states where Donald Trump will be running up the presidential margin. And it will take that many more split ticket voters for Democrats to do quite well. So let's go ahead and map our 2024 Senate elections as of right now, and again, figure out where is the Democratic Party's pathway to victory. I want to start off by characterizing the Republican states because it really just exemplifies my point here. The Republicans are in an ultimate, very strong advantage point in these Senate races, and you can see that on this map. When it comes down to states that will be absolutely safe, I know North Dakota was competitive last time. It will not be this time. I know Missouri was competitive last time. It will not be this time. Same thing in Indiana. Same thing in Tennessee. Same thing in Mississippi. Now, here we are in the states that we generally know are very solid for the Republican Party, with one exception, the state of West Virginia. Now, West Virginia in 2018 went to Joe Manchin. In 2012, also went to Joe Manchin by a very large amount. But the swing here worried him. And so in 2024, he decided he couldn't outrun the former president of the United States, and that he would be doing far worse than he did in 2018, and significantly much worse than he did in 2012. And he decided, I'm done. I'm leaving the U.S. Senate. And so West Virginia now has an easy, automatic Republican pickup. Jim Justice, the incumbent Republican governor of West Virginia, will now be the senator from that state. Easy flip. And so here we are. 48 for the Republicans, 28 for the Democrats. Now, this is taking into account all the states that are very routinely conservative. If we were to apply the states that Trump won in 2016, this is the map we get. We have Texas going there, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. It's pretty lopsided in favor of the Republican Party. Now, it's not as bad as it would have been in 2018, but it is pretty bad. And so I think we can take away this, all these characterizations in some of these swing states. Don't need to focus on that right now. But at baseline here, Republicans are at easily 48 seats, well outside the safe characterization. Now, this isn't to say that Democrats don't have their fair share, but they're starting at an insane deficit, 28 to 48, meaning Democrats are going to need to run up the margins in practically every single one of their states. The good news is that in states that Republicans think might be competitive, like Maryland, where Governor Larry Hogan is running there, it's not going to be competitive. In a state like Maine, which Republicans in theory could vie for, they know it's not going to be competitive. And so Democrats really, this is where they start to do well, by keeping in strong, tried and tested incumbents. People like Amy Klobuchar in Minnesota, who in 2018, Hillary Clinton won the state by 1.5, she won by 24 points. That's substantial. In Virginia, this is where Tim Kaine, remember his name? He ran with Hillary Clinton for president and vice president of the United States. He won easily by 15 points. He's on track for a very solid victory here. I go back and forth between a likely and a safe characterization, but Tim Kaine is going to be on track for a pretty strong victory. Democrats are going to win in New Mexico. For the sake of this video, it's not a prediction of, every characterization. It doesn't include tilt. It doesn't include likely and lean the same way we normally would. This is just for the sake of characterizing states. New Mexico is going to the Democrats. Virginia is going to the Democrats. But even then, characterizing all of those states, you still find yourself with 9 remaining toss-up states, Republicans at 48, Democrats at 43. And so the path becomes increasingly narrower. Why? Because Democrats are, again, defending territory in 7 out of these 9 states. The problem is that 2 out of the 7 were Trump 2016 and Trump 2020. The problem is that 6 out of the 7 were Trump 2016 states. So Democrats are really in for a rude awakening should Donald Trump win the presidential election by epic proportions, by the way that some of the polls are suggesting in some of these battleground states. If Bloomberg and Morning Consult's poll is correct, and that Biden is up by 5 in Michigan, but Trump is up by 7 in Pennsylvania, we could be seeing a very dueling Senate result as well, House results as well, and Democrats would not benefit from that. They need Biden to do well in both Pennsylvania and Michigan. And so, all around here, this map is going to be very much reliant on the presidential election, and I think you will find at the end of this video that the Senate majority does, in fact, hinge on the balance of the presidency far more than we otherwise might think. In the name of everything is always connected, and here we are, 2024, the same exact debacle that we saw back in 2020. It's quite interesting, actually, looking at the parallels here. So with West Virginia gone, where do Democrats make inroads next? Well, we generally know The Democrats have strong incumbents in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Bob Casey Jr. is likely not going to lose. Tammy Baldwin is likely not going to lose as well. These are incumbents who people like, people respect, and have had strong electoral victories even in the face of adversity. In 2018, Tammy Baldwin won by 11 points in Wisconsin. Keep in mind, this is a Trump plus one state. In Pennsylvania, another Trump plus one state, Bob Casey won by 13 points. Now granted, Leah Vukmir and Lou Barletta weren't the strongest of candidates, but Lou Barletta had been someone who had been known in the state of Pennsylvania, put in an effort here. Donald Trump campaigned in both of these states for the Republican nominees for Senate and was, completely obliterated. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin went to the Democratic Party. But even then, that brings Democrats to 45. It still needs to get closer. And so you look around to the rest of the country. Well, Michigan would be the next place to look in theory. In 2018, Democrats won in Michigan by roughly 7 points. The only problem here is now they have a retiring incumbent, which means now the state is honestly quite competitive. Elisa Slotkin, who's an incumbent U.S. representative, well known across the state, easily going to win that Democratic primary. She's only up by 2 points. And it is clear here that a lot of voters are genuinely undecided. Elisa Slotkin's victory by 2.2% is necessary to see a pathway to victory for the Democratic Party, but so is almost everything else. Now, Nevada and Arizona are the next two states that I think it becomes far more likely. Specific to Arizona, we see that Kari Lake, the failed Republican nominee for governor from 2022, is now the Republican nominee for Senate in Arizona. She is not the strongest candidate that Republicans could have put forth, and I genuinely think she could lose this election even if Trump wins it on a presidential level. Arizona is a state that uniquely dislikes Kari Lake, rejected her in 22, and very well may reject her again in 2024 by a very large amount. I honestly would bet on Ruben Gallego if I was looking at it from that lens. Now, moving over to the state of Nevada, this is a state where, for some reason, Jackie Rosen has actually had a very strong showing recently, has been able to do quite well in recent polls, whether it's a Republican pollster, whether it's a Democratic pollster, whether it's a nonpartisan pollster. She is up on average by 5.8%. She's liked, she's respected, she's a tried incumbent. She took down a Republican incumbent back in 2018, Dean Heller, who typically did quite well for what it was worth. Jackie Rosen likely going to win the Senate race here, and with that, brings Democrats to 48. Okay. 48 to 48. The Democratic majority now may very well rely on some of these states that, Donald Trump is arguably going to do quite well in. Because all four of these states on your screen right now that are considered to be toss-ups, I do believe Donald Trump would win this coming November easily. He's winning Florida by more than 5. He's winning Ohio by likely 10. He's winning Texas by more than 5. And he's winning Montana by more than 15. And so it's a very heavy lift here to get Democrats to actually win here. And I mentioned Texas and Florida as states that I think Trump will actually win by the narrower margins. I think Texas will vote to the left of Florida, and Florida will vote to the left of Ohio, and Ohio will vote to the left of Montana. But uniquely enough, the Democratic Party's pathway to the majority does not lie through Texas or Florida, but rather Ohio and Montana. Right now, Democrats have the narrowest of advantages in states like Montana and Ohio. Right now, we've seen that in this battleground state, Sherrod Brown has been polling quite high. In Montana, it's a bit different of a story. We haven't seen any recent polls out of the state, and it is a very close and competitive race. And unlike Sherrod Brown in Ohio, who in 2012 was able to win as an incumbent by 5 points when Obama only won the state by 3, and then in 2018 won by 6 points despite Trump winning the state by 8 points in the election prior and spending a lot of time out in Ohio for Jim Renacki here. We've seen that in 2012 and 2018, Sherrod Brown has a strong history of doing significantly better than the Democrats did in the election prior or in the coinciding election. Versus Montana, where Jon Tester absolutely has done that too, but has always ran exceptionally close. I mean, he has never had a complete slam dunk election like you've seen some of these swing state Democrats that also went on to lose. People like Joe Manchin, who won by 30 points back in 2012. People like Heidi Heitkamp, who had a narrow race there. But again, that was not supposed to happen. She was expected entirely to lose this race here. Massively outperforming Claire McCaskill. That was a crazy election. I encourage you to look at that because Democrats knew exactly what they were doing when they were nominating Todd Akin to be the Republican nominee there. They did that with intention beyond belief. Same thing in Indiana. Democrats knew what they were saying. Now, I do think Jon Tester will do very, very well, but he knows how to always keep it close. And so it is really hard to gauge how this election is because in no reality is Jon Tester able or would be able to win this state by 5 to 10 points. I don't know if I agree with that being the case with Sherrod Brown. I think Bernie Moreno was the worst Republican that Republicans could have put up. Tim Sheehy was not. He was the hand-picked one by the National Republican Senatorial Committee, by Mitch McConnell, by Steve Daines. They wanted him because they knew he was the more electable one. Bernie Moreno was the least electable one. And so I think there is a reality in which Ohio becomes more Democrat than Montana in the race here, which may not be super surprising given that the state is less conservative. But ultimately, though, Democrats will rely on both of them winning. I mean, they can't just have Sherrod Brown win one and Jon Tester lose the other. They need both because there will be no pathway to the majority through Texas or Florida. As much as Colin Allred will narrow up the race, Ted Cruz will win because Texas is a fundamentally Republican state. And I might have to add, too, that Montana and Ohio are far easier investments than a state like Texas, which has double the population of Ohio, 10 times the population of Montana. It's a lot harder to get into media markets and sway the masses of voters when in Montana, you're talking about a voting pool of less than 2 million versus Texas of well over 2 million. And so Texas, Florida, I do think Republicans are on track for pretty substantial victories here, at least in Florida. I think we're going to see Rick Scott clear the field there. In Texas, though, Ted Cruz will probably have a narrower race, but it will not allow for the Democratic Party to win an outright majority. And so that is where we bring it to 50-50 here. And the Democratic majority becomes entirely reliant on the presidential election, on who wins, Trump or Biden. It's a very, very similar situation to what we had back in 2020, when Democrats won the majority 50-50. And it was hard fought. Democrats spent hundreds of millions of dollars in these battleground Senate races. And arguably, they didn't have much to show for it besides a majority that got by with Vice President Harris's vote. Versus this time, if Democrats were to make it to the majority 50-50 and win that presidential election, it will not be without a single state lost. In 2020, it was a different story. Democrats spent $100+ million in North Carolina, lost. Democrats spent $100+ million in South Carolina, lost. Democrats spent $100+ million in Iowa, lost. Democrats spent $100+ million in Maine, lost. Democrats spent tens of millions in Montana, lost. Democrats spent tens of millions in Kansas and lost. Democrats spent millions in Alaska and lost. And while they had victories in Arizona and Georgia twice, in Michigan, in Minnesota, it was not the election of slam dunking the Senate races like Democrats wanted, but it got them the majority. This one will need to be a slam dunk. It will need to be a victory in every single state with a Democratic incumbent now. And every single state they won in 2018 with the exception of one. There is no room for error here in 2024. This is not 2020. This is not 2022. There is no room for error. And Democrats, if they are able to do this, will pull off one of the most substantial electoral feats we have seen in generations. We have seen in generations to turn around a presidential election that looks like it's going so poorly, to turn around Senate races that should not even be in consideration to be competitive for Democrats here. This is going to be a very interesting race. Democrats, in theory, should not even be able to win in Montana, win in Ohio, and if they do, it will be a very substantial victory and one that cannot be ignored and one that will show us that the Democratic Party may be far more competent than what some of the pundits might be saying. The pathway to the majority is slim. It's narrow, and increasingly so as we get on with the election. There's not much happening in these battleground states, and while that may be benefiting Democrats in states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan, it doesn't help them in states like Montana and Ohio, where you need far more better polling, better results, better security in states that Donald Trump is on track to win by pretty substantial margins. But really, at this point, only time will tell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.